Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and the other day I did a video explaining that rep range isn't as important as people seem to think it is for stimulating hypertrophy. That actually it's total workload that matters, not the rep range itself that you utilize. It determines how much muscle growth you stimulate up to a point, because people need to understand there are diminished returns. You can't just stimulate limitless amounts of muscle growth. It doesn't work that way. But let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this, because we've come to an insane conclusion in the fitness world, the online fitness world today, that people from any other generation who've been observing this would think that everyone involved in this community is borderline mentally retarded. Because people actually have these ideas today that lifting heavy weights won't make you bigger. And it's like people actually think that way. And it's not just that, oh, you'll gain a little less muscle than doing higher reps. No, they actually think that really heavy weight with low reps doesn't stimulate significant muscle growth at all. And it's absolutely crazy. And to the point to where when I kind of was saying you can get big on triples, which every coach in the world, every strength and conditioning coach knows that, without even looking at the research, which I'm going to link some research down below on that, but without even looking at the research, they all know that. High volumes of triples have always bulked up athletes, always helped bulk up athletes, and any coach who's ever worked with people knows that. There's no question about it. And I mean, a perfect example, have you guys ever met anyone who could strict bench press 400 pounds? And I mean strict, I mean pause on their chest for a 1 count and press it like you have to do in an actual powerlifting meet. You got to pause on the chest. Who could bench 400 pounds who had a tiny pecs or tiny triceps? Of course not. Of course not. There might be a rare genetic freak out there somewhere who can do it, but I promise you none of you have ever met someone like that. You know, there's Richard Hawthorns out there, but they're extremely rare genetically, and that's a whole different topic. Anyone else who doesn't have really freakish, weird genetics for strength, they're going to get big as fuck when they get to where they can deadlift 600 pounds or pause bench 400 pounds. I mean, you can do those two things. You're going to be pretty big. No way around it. But people have these ideas that it doesn't stimulate muscle growth, and this has come from this whole idea of a hypertrophy rep range, and it's because people don't understand that, you know, in the old days, everyone tried to get big and strong together. They didn't differentiate between the two before drugs came into the mix, before massive amounts of drugs came into the mix, that changed people's ideas on training and what it takes to stimulate muscle growth. But also, it's what people realized many years ago was that there are certain advantages for gaining muscle with higher reps and lighter weight. And by advantages, I don't mean they put more muscle on you. It's that there's better economy of your time. It's better economy of your time, meaning you don't have to do as many sets. You can come in and do 3 sets of an exercise and stimulate probably maximum muscle growth for most of the muscles involved in that exercise and leave. All right, you probably stimulated 80 to 90% of the possible muscle growth that you could stimulate in one workout by coming in and doing like 3 sets of 10 close to failure, or the last one to failure, walk out the door, you're done. All right, that's what people started figuring out. They can come in and just do 3 sets of 10 for several different exercises and pretty much do a full body routine and leave. People figured this out a long time ago. It stimulated just as much growth as going heavy. But they didn't have to do nearly as many sets. It's also a little easier to recover from. So you can spend less time in the gym, isn't quite as hard on your nervous system and recovery. That's what people figured out. They didn't think that it built more muscle. And people have these ideas now that this actually builds more muscle, that the hypertrophy rep range puts more hypertrophy on you. No, that's not the case. It's just the most efficient way in many cases to get muscle mass. But the ironic part is that we know that, and that's the case. This is known and understood in the science, that's all it is. It just lets you do more volume per set and then get out the door. It lets you get out of the gym faster, that you can come in, and if you're working in that sort of rep range, a workout can be 30 minutes. You can stimulate maximum muscle growth and get the fuck out the door and leave. That was the whole point. That's why hypertrophy rep range works. Yet what does everyone do? Everyone comes in and they train for a fucking hour. Doing the high reps, they come in and do 12 sets, 15 sets, sometimes for a body part, come in and do 15 sets for their chest. The whole point of hypertrophy work was that you only have to do a few sets to stimulate nearly maximum or maximal muscle growth. That was the whole idea. You could do a few sets, you get all the volume you need, and you fucking leave. So people actually throw away all the benefits of high rep training all the time by coming in and doing high volume training. You only really need high set training, high number of sets, when you're going heavy for low reps or fast for low reps. All right, that's the only time you really benefit from that for the most part. And when you're doing sets of 10, you don't need that much to stimulate good growth. Now, what I want to talk about, though, is Brad Schoenfeld's study, because I had people tell me saying that you could gain just as much size on low reps was bro science, and they wanted to see proof. Well, I'll link Dr. Brad's study down below. It's going to be there. And Brad Schoenfeld, this is his area of expertise, is hypertrophy. Natural bodybuilding, making muscles grow as quickly as possible, how cardio affects body recompositioning, everything from how fasted versus fed cardio, HIIT cardio versus slow cardio, different rep ranges, volumes, all of that affect muscle growth rates. All right, that is what he has done dozens of studies on. That's his area of expertise. He loves body composition. He's obsessed with it. That's what he wants to study in drug-free lifters. And he's made a career of it. And what he found in this study, and remember, there's no bias to a study like this. Like, he's not making money. No one's paying. There's no department or company that sells high reps versus low reps. Sorry, there's not going to be a financial bias here. It isn't about products. It isn't about supplements. It's just about finding what works. He compared, and I'd said before it was like 7 sets of 3. People told me it was 10 sets of 3 because he equaled volume, but it wasn't the case. He compared doing 3 sets of 10 with 90 seconds between, which he called bodybuilder workouts, 90-second rest, 3 sets of 10, right? He compared that with people doing 7 sets of 3 with 3 minutes apart, so that they could lift heavy, have good breaks so they can come back and lift heavy again for 7 sets. So 21 total reps of heavy weight versus 30 reps of medium weight. What he found was that they produced the same amount of muscle growth in the test subjects. There was no difference in the amount of muscle growth that these people gained in the 2 groups. None. What he found was that the group, and he called it powerlifting training, 7 sets of 3, they gained more muscle. Now, people say, well, that's not equal volume. Yes, it is. Volume isn't how many reps and sets you do. Volume is your total workload. So if you do 20 reps with 50% heavier weight than someone else does 30 reps with, that's the same amount of volume. Hopefully people can grasp that. Meaning, you do 20 reps with 300 pounds spread out over sets. 20 times 300, that's 6,000 pounds moved on that exercise, assuming the same range of motion, versus doing 30 with 200. So 200 pounds versus 300, that's the same amount of volume. It's not just your reps and sets, it's your actual work done. So what he did is that he roughly equaled the work done. And when they did the same amount of work, they gained the same amount of muscle. The downside, he said, is that though you could be slightly more injury prone with the heavy work, and it might be harder to recover from in some cases. And the big thing, it took a lot longer. All right, 3 sets of 10 with 90 seconds between. You're talking about a minute and a half of rest between all the sets together, plus whatever warm-ups you do, plus whatever. That takes like 5 minutes, all right? 5 minutes. To do 7 sets of 3 with 3 minutes between, you need 20 minutes. Roughly, just a rough ballpark, right? About 20 minutes, or is it more? It's actually more. No, it's not, because it's 3 times 6 breaks. So 20 minutes versus 5 minutes. You spend more time in the gym. That's the downside. That is the biggest downside to trying to maximize hypertrophy with low reps. You have to do more sets, and it takes you longer to get it done. But they produce the same amount of muscle growth. And this has been noted for years by strength and conditioning coaches. So Brad actually did a comparative study, and they produce the same amount of muscle growth. So people who are sitting here saying low reps and heavy weight doesn't produce maximal muscle growth or can't, the data says that you can. The anecdote in the real world says that it happens. Studies like this show that it happens. How in the fuck can you even argue that it doesn't? There are tons of strength athletes who train with triples, mostly, who are big as fuck. All right, they may not shoot synthol in their arms and use maybe as many drugs as some bodybuilders, so they're not going to be quite as big always, but they're still big as fuck by normal standards. It works very, very well. Been proven in the real world for generations. Lifting heavy weight makes you big. It's not that hard to understand. It's just that you've got to equalize the total workload, and you can do a hell of a lot more workload per set with 10 reps than you can with 3. All right, because lifting 200 pounds 10 times is 2,000 pounds of work done, but lifting 300 for 3 is only 900. All right, you're getting less than half the work per set. So you've got to do a lot more sets to get the same workload, because it is volume and workload is what determines how much muscle growth you stimulate. But people need to understand it's not a linear relationship. It doesn't mean if you do 5,000 pounds of work that you'll gain half the muscle than if you do 10,000. It's a diminished return curve. But more work usually equals more growth on a diminished return scale. So hopefully that explains a lot of that, and people understand how insane the idea is that you don't get big from lifting heavy weights. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.